Hey everybody, this is Chris with Overclockers Club. It's 5090 time. So the other day I did the 5090 unboxing. I'll post a link in the description if you want to go back and see that, but the real excitement is here when we've got a card that we can actually power up and run. So the big comparison that everybody does is comparing this to the 4090. And as you can see, the only real difference, other than the color's a little darker, this is a 2-slot card versus a 3-slot card, but the silhouette or the outline, the overall shape of the card is the same as the 4090. So you're not going to gain anything in length as far as a shorter card that'll fit in cases more easily. You do get a thinner, lighter card. The old 4090 here was like 2.24 kilograms. And the new 5090 is like 1.88 kilograms, if I remember correctly. So it's a little bit lighter. They've crammed a lot more horsepower into a smaller package, and they've managed to keep a decent looking cooling solution here. We've got 2 fans on the same side instead of opposite sides on the 4090. These are the same diameter fans that we had on the 4090, and they appear to be the same design, same fin count, same fin shape. So I don't see any differences there. We've got some vents here on either side to help direct the heat away from the card so you're not sucking it back in and recycling the hot air any more than you have to. The key there is to have a case that has really good airflow so that all the heat that your GPU is dumping into the case gets pushed out of the case before it heats the GPU back up or heats any of the other internal case components back up. And you certainly want to avoid any more heat than what is necessary. So here's sort of the business end of the card. I pointed this out in the unboxing, but I'll sort of talk about it again real quick. We've got our HDMI ports. It's interesting that they are opposing each other. They're facing different directions. And we've got our 3 display ports there on the end. And then on the 5090, our display ports are over here with the HDMI on the top. And again, you'll notice that they're flipped over between the 2 different cards. Also on the 4090, we've got the vents here to help push air outside of the case. The 5090 does not have that. It's completely blocked off. All of our air is being pushed into the case. Not that there was a lot of air coming out of here. I would say any air you can get outside of the case is good, but we'll have to see how much heat the 5090 puts out. Now, here we'll just talk about the specifications, the general specifications for the 5090, and I've got the 5080 right next to it. We'll have a 5080 here to review very soon, but right now we're really focusing on the 5090. You can compare the 5080 to the 5090. You can see there's a considerable difference there in some of the specifications, particularly the CUDA cores. We've got 21,760 on the 5090 and less than half of that on the RTX 5080. And we've got half the memory, 16 gigabytes of GDDR7 on the 5080 and 32 gigabytes of GDDR7 on the 5090. And it hasn't been that many years when you would see a graphics card that would come out with 2 gigabytes of RAM, and that was impressive. And now we're up to 32 now. The memory interface there also is impressive at 512 bits versus 256 bits on the 5080. And you can go to the Nvidia website, and they have some great charts here that compare the various 40 series cards, the various 50 series cards. You can sort of dig down. And some of the stuff isn't really apples to apples because you've got, 4th generation versus 5th generation on some of the components. But my guess is, until we see a 5080 and start getting some numbers, the 4090, at least on paper, is probably somewhere between the 5080 and the 5090. But we'll just have to see how all of that shakes out. So here's my test system. My motherboard is an MSI Z890 Ace, and the CPU is the latest from Intel, which is the Core Ultra 9 285K, and I'm running around 5.4 gigahertz. The cooler is an MSI MAG Core Liquid i360. The GPU, of course, is the Nvidia RTX 5090. I've got 48 gigabytes of DDR5 Kingston Fury Renegade CU-DIMM 8400, running a Solidigm P42 Plus Gen 4 SSD, and then the operating system is, of course, Windows 11 Pro with a version of 24H2. And I will get ready to plug the card into the motherboard, but first I've got this little riser here. This is from Nvidia, and it is used, it's called the Nvidia PCAT. It's used to look at the power that's actually coming through the graphics card so I can see how much power it's using. And it consists of this little circuit board here that is powered up. You can see it has 3 channels. I'm using the center channel. The power that comes in at the bottom there, that's coming from the power supply. It comes out this other side and ultimately will plug into the graphics card. Now the power connector is sort of recessed there and at an angle. And initially I was a little concerned that that might be a little hard to see if your connector is plugged in all the way. But after I plugged it in just a little bit ago, and I'll plug it in again, you can actually see, if I can get the camera over here just right, you can see that it seats firmly. You can actually hear a little click there. So my initial concern was that I couldn't see if it was plugged in all the way, but that is not the case, so no problem there. And I've got the power to it. You can see there's a little bit of a white LED effect there, some accents. Now those are not RGB, so you cannot change the colors. And it's the same on both sides, although my cables are in the way a little bit there, and then the logo here is also lit up. But the PCAT here, the circuit board, you can see, I can look at the little display there and in real time see the voltage and the wattage or the power that's being used. And there's also some PCAT software, and I'll show all this a little later, but I can monitor that on the computer. And I move my cooler to the other side here, just sort of get it out of the way. There are pluses and minuses to having an open air test bench. Good thing is I can move things pretty easily. My observation here, what I see is actually a pretty nice looking card. It's everything is symmetrical about it. We've got the fans there on this side with the centerpiece there and the lighting effect. And we've got essentially the same thing here with the cooling fins and the same lighting effect there in the middle. Very streamlined, but it's really a nice looking card. Not that the 4090 was ugly, but they just did a really nice job here updating the 5090. And like I was talking about earlier, it is very important to have a good case with good airflow to keep a good fresh supply of cool air coming in. A lot of factors such as what time of year it is, what the ambient temperature is in the room, all of that goes into how cool your system stays. But this would basically, in most cases, this side would be facing down and pulling air in from the bottom of the case, and it's going to push the hot air straight up and out. So if you have a case that has some good fans at the top to help pull that air out, that would probably be a good thing. And a quick word about the power connector here. So this is a 4-into-1. And what I noticed right away is it's longer than what we had last year. And the wires are individually wrapped with a much softer braiding. I don't know, I think that's nylon, not 100% sure. We've got the stress relief, extra side cables there so that your wires don't take all the load if you pull on this. The other thing I notice is we've got some real strain relief here built into the ends, so we can pull a radius there with the wires, but they're not bending at the connection points, which is really good. The older connectors here, we just had some heat shrink tape on there, and I don't know that this is quite as robust as what we see here today. So, nice improvement. Okay, next we will do some Blender benchmarks. And those benchmarks are done. I'll get those recorded. And now we've got some Nvidia DLSS testing on 3D Mark. It does 2 tests. The first one is with DLSS off, and then it turns it on, and we'll see, or we should see, quite a difference in the frames per second. So here it is with DLSS off. You can see we're in the mid to upper 60s on the frame rate. And then as soon as that test is done, part 2 is with DLSS enabled. Of course, we're talking about DLSS 4. And you can see the frame rates are off the chart compared to the previous test. And here's the test result. You can see there is a considerable difference with the DLSS on versus off. And now we'll do a quick benchmark with Borderlands 3. You can see I ran this last month and I got 125 frames per second at that point. I was using a 4080. So let's see what the 5090 does. Okay, we're wrapping the Borderlands 3 benchmark up, so let's see what sort of numbers we get. I forgot it does not automatically dump you back to the screen here. I have to get in here manually, so that's quite an improvement, 221.9 frames per second with the 5090. And now it's time for a little Cyberpunk 2077. We've got all the settings ready. Let's see what the benchmark does. Well, so far I would say that's a pretty impressive frame rate. We'll see where it ends up. Okay, so 404.78. The minimum is 370. So I would say that's pretty impressive. And I just realized I had the resolution set to 2560 by 1440, and the monitor I'm using is actually a 3440 by 1440. So let's run that again and see what it looks like. So no surprises there. Going up in resolution brings the frame rate down a little bit. So yeah, it did bring it down, but that's still impressive. And we're going to run this 5090 with the frame generation off altogether, and let's see what sort of numbers we get with that. Okay, so that definitely brings the frame rate down. Now 120 frames per second is not horrible, but the frame generation being switched off makes a pretty big difference. So there we're close to 113 frames per second on average with the frame generation turned off. So like I said, it definitely makes a difference. Okay, we've got Marvel Rivals with everything cranked up.
That may seem dangerous, but I've never felt safer than when I'm a
30
spider.
seconds. Stay strong.
It's pretty exciting to partner up with one of the real X-Men. A dream come true.
This isn't a pop song, Luna. Real life is
Who lost their shields? You know what to do, spiders? I know that sound. When that face hurts.
To do is capture the mission area. Got it?
Okay, so now this is with everything cranked up and the frame generation turned on, and you can see we're getting well over 300, well over 400 frames per second. So a pretty big improvement. All right, we've got the Star Wars Outlaws rolling here. Everything is cranked up. It looks like we're getting upper 200s in the frame rate. I've never played this game before, so I'm not entirely sure what I'm doing here, but
You wouldn't believe the junk they just throw away. I found two perfectly good.
looks like we're getting close to 300. And now I've got the frame generation turned off. DLSS is disabled, so let's see. I already got that saved. Let's go ahead and see what kind of frame rates we get now. Okay, quite a bit lower. 89, maybe into the 90s. It's not horrible, but it's nowhere what we had before. It seems a little choppier. Yeah, definitely makes a difference. Okay, this is Alan Wake 2, again with all of the settings cranked up. DLSS and frame generation enabled. Looks like similar to the Star Wars game, we're in the 200s, mid 200s maybe. Looks like it's dropped a little bit. I'm not real sure what's going on here. I've never played this one before. Looks like I'm moving some half-naked dude around. Let's see what the frame rates look like when I disable some of these features. So I'll go back over here to frame generation. We'll turn that off. We'll turn off DLSS. And let's see what that does. And it looks like it cut the frame rate roughly in half. Actually, a little more than half. We're actually getting into the middle 70s. So that's a considerable difference when those features are disabled. Now I'm doing some thermal testing, some stress testing here. This is the Nvidia PCAT. This is a separate circuit board that monitors power going through it. So your power from the power supply comes in one side. It is monitored here with the circuitry. Here's a little screen showing you in real time what sort of power it's using along with the voltage. And then the output here goes up to the graphics card. And there's a special riser you can see there with that little green LED. Actually spaces it up off of the motherboard, so I have to put some supports in there to keep it from wobbling around. But the end result here is this graph, so we can look at the average. We're running around 456 watts. We maxed out at 475. We hit a peak there at a minimum of 418. I'm running MSI Combustor to stress the system. And one thing I noticed, it is not reporting the proper temperature because I'm pretty sure we're not running at 255 degrees Celsius. So I've got the MSI Afterburner running. I trust the 60 degrees Celsius that it's reporting over the 255. And I have the fan speed set to auto mode. Again, we're holding at 60 degrees Celsius. Fan speed there, it looks like we're at 61%. Over here by the unit, I can certainly hear the fans, and I definitely feel the warm air coming off the back. I'll have to get the thermal camera out here in a moment. So even though I can hear the fans, they're not terribly loud. And once you're inside of a case, I don't think you'll hear anything. And I canceled the combustor stress testing there, and you can see the power usage definitely drops down along with the temperature and the fan speed. Those will slowly creep down to idle. Is this graph, so we can look at the average. We're running around 456 watts. We maxed out at 475. We hit a peak there at a minimum of 418. I'm running MSI combustor to stress the system. Now, one thing I noticed, it is not reporting the proper temperature because I'm pretty sure we're not running at 255 degrees Celsius. So I've got the MSI afterburner running. I trust the 60 degrees Celsius that it's reporting over the 255. Okay, so I got the thermal camera out. For reference, there's the keyboard. On my desktop, it's around 19.5, 20 degrees Celsius, somewhere in that range. So we come up here to the graphics card that is under a load, and you can certainly see where the warm spots are. We've got around 53, 54 degrees Celsius at the exit. There's toward the center of the card. We'll come around to the other side. You can see a little bit of heat there at the power connector too. Not terrible, but it's definitely a spot that the camera picks up. And this is the intake side where the fans are. You can certainly see the cool air being pulled in. You can see a little bit of the heat pipes coming through where the fans are. Down at the bottom there is the Nvidia PCAT, a little PCIe riser. Here's the board. You can definitely see the power passing right there through that middle channel. And the back of the card, you can't really see much. Well, you can see where it's coming through a little bit there. Yep. The other end of the card here looks pretty cool. Okay, so here is the Procyon AI text generation benchmark. So we'll see what these numbers look like. And here are the test results. So I ran this test with the 4090 and the 5090. And you can see the top row there is the 5090, and then the bottom row is the 4090. And you can see there's a definite difference there between the performance of the 5090 and the 4090 on this AI text generation benchmark from Procyon. And when we look at the overall benchmarks here, I ran a series of synthetic benchmarks and some gaming benchmarks. And overall, the performance of the 5090, it's no surprise. Even without the frame generation and the DLSS 4 features enabled, it still has a much higher performance level than the 4090. Again, not a surprise. And with the frame generation and the DLSS 4 enabled, it really kicks it up a fair amount. And the only benchmark that was lower, looking at the 3D Mark set of benchmarks, was the DirectX ray tracing. It was lower than the 4090. The only thing I can think of is that maybe this set of benchmarks, they have not been fully optimized for the 5090 yet. That's the only thing I can think of. And keep in mind that right out of the gate, when this card releases, we're going to have roughly 75 games, 75 titles that can take advantage of this new technology from the 50 series cards. And you can rest assured that there will be a run of games to follow that will be slowly adopting this technology, and there will be driver updates, of course, to go along with that. Okay, so wrapping this all up, I have heard some people ask the question about the 40 series, whether or not it will support the DLSS 4. And while it won't have access to the full functionality of DLSS 4, it will support it. The thing that it won't support or it won't have access to is the multi-frame generation feature. It'll only be available on the 50 series. The 40 series will still be able to utilize DLSS 4 super resolution and frame generation, just not the multi-frame generation. That's how I understand it. So overall, my thoughts here on the 5090. It does what it's supposed to do. The performance is a notch or so above the 4090, and then when you enable the DLSS 4 and the frame generation, the card really shines. Now, I see people talk about the fake frame generation, and I'm not going to argue how and why they say that. For me, the overall experience within the game is what counts. How I got there, I guess, doesn't matter so much to me. That's one of those subjective things. I have to look at the card overall. I mean, they shrank it down a little bit. It's not as bulky. It's a little lighter. The price is something that you may argue with, but I see those arguments and debates every time there's a new release, and it's focused primarily, at least initially, on the first card that's released. And I guess, you know, there's a price to pay if you want to be the guy who has the latest and greatest. This is more of an enthusiast level card here. So now that we've seen generally what the 5090 can do, it'll be interesting to see what the 5080 can do. And we'll have those numbers here very soon. And at that point, you'll just have to ask yourself, does the performance and the benefits, do they justify the cost? If you're ready for an upgrade, if you're running a 1070 now, maybe it's time to make a significant leap. Is the 5090 the one to start with? Maybe, maybe not. Remember, we've got several other cards coming out, so we'll have to see where the performance points are and where the price points are. So overall, I like the card. I think it does what it's supposed to do. I would give it the Overclockers Club Gold Award. So, this is Chris with Overclockers Club. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.